all money resides somewhere. Some people it's in their regular bank account. Some people it's 401ks, IRAs. Others, it may be in travel. They spend all their money on vacations or on their home. The idea, all that money is living somewhere. We believe that we can show you empirical data that your money's better off living here than virtually any other system. So as a result of that, the clients that catch this, and we readily admit it's not for everyone, but for those that it fits, then I think one of the first things that they see is I can have my money living here and growing and building for the future, along with all the other insurance benefits that come with it, while at the same time being able to scale up my business.
Well, Scott, thank you for joining us on the Infinite Banking Initiative.
Thank you. Hey, it's good to be here. I appreciate it.
We want to start off just by hearing your story and how you discovered the infinite banking concept.
I've been in financial services since 1994. So if you rewind the clock a long time ago, 100 years ago, I'm an older guy. In 94, I was just separating from the United States Air Force. And they had a program at the time where you could get your pilot's license through the Air Force. They'd pay for that. So I my dream was to be the next, Tom Cruise, and flying jets and, all the glamorous lifestyle. And it was the most adrenaline rush thing I've ever done, at being in a little Cessna and flying. So anyway, I got my pilot's license through the Air Force. And then once I met my commitment, I had a choice to make as far as re-upping. And I had a mentor at the time. His name was Tom Land. I've had mentors throughout my life that have made a big impact on me. And so Tom said, "Well, Scott, what are you going to do? What's next?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to pursue flying." And he said, "Well, how are you going to do that? Are you going to do it, inside the Air Force?" And I said, No. I'd rather go the commercial route. And my brilliant plan at the time, y'all see, it'll reveal my age and my maturity, which my wife says has stayed pretty consistent even today to what it. But she, that my idea was to be a charter pilot and go island hopping somewhere in the Caribbean. And that's what I was going to do for my life, And it sounded very glamorous and intriguing. Anyway, my friend brought me to reality and said, "Scott, you have to have the money to pay for your instrument license and multi-engine land." And so I said, "Okay." And he worked for a company that's no longer in business called US Life. And they did SGLI pre-conversions, which SGLI, Service Members Group Life Insurance. And so when you're at the time, I think we had 100,000. Now I'm sure today, David, it's a lot more than that, but that's what we had when I was active duty.
400 to 500. Yeah.
I figured. So anyway, we would approach those folks, and this was primarily a military company, and offer to convert that to some type of permanent coverage. And so at the time, variable life was all the rage, like a variable whole life product. And so I started off selling the fixed product because I just had my insurance license at the counsel of my friend. And then went ahead and got my securities license. So I was 6 and 63 because he said, this is what you need to do to, actively grow the account. Right. So I did that, and I got my securities license. And so I would, talk with people going through the NCO or the first sergeant's office, someone, to get permission. And we would do presentations for service members about their life insurance, how we could pre-convert that. And that way they could lock in a lower cost of insurance instead of waiting another 10 years until they retired or whatever. And so I, liked the idea of being able to get a commission on an insurance case. And, I would make more off one commission from one insurance case than I did for a month in active duty Air Force. And so I was glad that I made that trip. And my flying kind of took a backseat a few years later when I discovered something more intriguing than flying. But anyway, that's where I started. And so my career started all the way back in 94. And then if you fast forward through a couple other carriers that I represented in 2008, 2009 is when I met David and Nelson. And the economy, if you look back at what 2008 was, it was a disaster. The subprime mortgage market had threatened to bring down certainly the United States financial system and impact even global economies. And so we sat back and watched while all these accounts that I had set up for people that trusted me, because I was the nerd that did all the studying and all the back end, all the preparation, followed all the algorithms and all the plans, and stress tested every single one. And yet, in spite of all those things and doing everything right, so to speak, the end result is we had to sit back and watch clients hemorrhaging money when the market crashed. And so we had tried to, I had 3 offices at the time, and we had tried to impose stop losses throughout 2 of our main broker-dealer support units. And the result was I don't know, 35 or 40 minutes later, after I made the request through our admins, their response was the stop losses failed. And I said, what does that mean? That didn't have a place in my registry, in my brain, for that to make sense. And so, as you probably saw in, reports since then, these companies had such a surge of pressure at that time in all these different markets that the system was overwhelmed. And so these clients, there was nothing we could do, y'all, but sit back and watch. And I had been a successful, so to speak, advisor, and we'd done everything right. And still our clients hemorrhaged money. So the people that were close to retirement, Lee, I mean, these folks that had worked a lifetime, accumulated that money and trusted me. And then to see that money evaporate, to me, it was heartbreaking. This hit me personally. And so I was very disenchanted with the entire industry. I thought it was dog eat dog and unethical, and then putting all people's money in investments where you had no access or very limited access, no control. By definition, for me to invest money with you, I've got to give up control of that money. I've got to give it to you, right? So if you're the financial advisor. So I was on my way out. And David, I think, probably knows most of this story, but I was so fed up. And, I thought I would, go start a landscaping business where it was just me and my lawnmower. And I thought I would,
that sounds like a good song. Yeah.
Well, I thought I'd be happier, because I was so frustrated by this. And a friend of mine told me, before you do that, you may want to meet this guy. He's revolutionizing the industry. And I remember he used all these grandiose explanations. I'm like, well, this guy sounds to me like he's superhuman. And so I looked up his information. And he looked like a grandfatherly figure, and so I thought, well, it can't hurt for me to meet with him, and maybe I can even give him a few pointers, because I'm so sharp, I thought of my deluded brain, and so I met Nelson, and it didn't take long to figure out he was definitely the teacher, and I was definitely the student, and so I invited him and David to come, and we were off to the races.
Yeah. I remember that trip up to Greenville, South Carolina. I think it was 2008, but it might have been 2009. I can't remember. One of my son was at Furman at the time, Furman University in Greenville, and so we had an opportunity to catch up with him too. But yeah, I remember going to the your agency office there. It was a really cool place, and it was, I think they just built that new baseball stadium. Is that AA up there or AAA or whatever?
I don't know which one, David. I know it's like a feeder system to the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, it was all. You're up there, a nice veranda, so you actually sit up there in the veranda and watch a baseball game. And
very cool place.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, so that was a good. Nelson did his 10-hour seminar for you guys. The first night, lay the foundation and then socialize. Yeah. And then the whole next day working through the seminar. It was good. Yeah. I remember definitely meeting you.
There's a funny little side story to that. I had, because this was new to me, hearing about infinite banking was new. And so I decided if I'm going to do this, this is my personality, ready, fire, aim. If you're going to do it right. And so we had paid out some money, and I brought in some business owners just maybe from within an hour or two of Greenville. And there were 23 invitations that we had sent out. And I'm sorry, 27 or 28, 23 showed up for the meeting. And of the 23, if not immediately, over the next, I don't know, don't hold me to this because it's been a long time ago, but say 6 months or so, of the 23, 17 became clients. And so all the people in my, my family and things that were saying, Scott, this is crazy to spend this kind of money on this event, and you don't know this guy, and then in the end to see, Nelson stand before a room and do what only Nelson could do, just was incredible. And for 17 out of 23 became clients. So it was a great first meeting for me.
Yeah, that's cool. Those are strong numbers, definitely. Yeah, I tell you what, man, he was, if to get him in the door was important. Okay. If you could get him in the door and they had exposure to the book, even before they got there, it was a double whammy. So, yeah. So they had to know what he was talking about. Otherwise it's like, wait a minute, am I here to learn how to run a grocery store or invest my money, So you talked about, your clients losing 40 to 50%. Was that mostly money under management, or was that also some of the variable products that you had out there?
There's a blend of both. I was probably an unusual shop, David. Probably 65 or 70% of ours were in variable products and not in an AUM model, but we had both. And I had some very knowledgeable people working for me, and we collaborated with lots of other teams. So if you've not experienced that, y'all, if you've not gone through something like that, then it's hard to explain the emotions that go through a client's mind, because they feel abject confusion first, helplessness second, frustration that quickly turns to anger. Okay, that's kind of the psychological progression, and it was hard to be part of.
That's when you change your phone number, right? And,
that's right. Yeah. So that's right.
So, do you still have any of those clients today that went through that with you?
Oh yeah. All right. We've maintained a lot of that. Now, my approach today, David, as you know, we're different. I started Wellington Capital Reserve in 2017, and we're solely an IBC shop. That's what we do. If there's something that comes in other than that, it's kind of a one-off for us. Everything, all of our teaching and development, all of our events, our process, our model that we take our clients through, very intentional, but all that is centered upon what Nelson taught me and what he went through. And y'all, there were people I know that were closer to Nelson than me, but I'm not sure there's anybody that loved Nelson more than I did. I respected him. Everything he said was true. And, I remember in the book, reading through this book, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent, David, we'll go back to you for your follow-up. But when I was reading through the book, what impacted me was, and I highlighted this, my books are all marked up, and Nelson signed probably 3 or 4 of these books for me. And, somebody would pick up my book instead of, theirs or whatever around the office. And so I was thankful to have the last one, which was, I think, 2019. It was the year that we did the movie was released, or that short film about Nelson's life. And that was the last time he signed one for me. But anyway, on page 21 of my, mutilated, marked up book, but on page 21, he said at the top of the page, "This is creating your own banking system through dividend paying life insurance." And banking was very intriguing to me, and obviously growing people's money was intriguing, but I'd had a bad taste in my mouth because of the investment side of things. So here's what it says, Matt. He starts off with Matthew 25:27. You should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest, right? And it was funny because my background coming out of the Air Force, I had two things I was doing: what generated income and what, where my passion was, which was in learning and teaching the Bible. And so when I had this adrenaline rush, this ultimate high from flying, I thought nothing's ever going to be more satisfying to me than flying a plane. That was until I taught my first Bible class. And then I thought, man, flying a plane does not compare with helping, people see these timeless truths. And, everyone has different belief systems, so I don't impose that on others. This is just mine, right? But I had studied this passage in Matthew chapter 25. And so when I was reading this in Becoming Your Own Banker, there was such a connection there. There was symmetry between Nelson's value system and then what his approach to financial matters. And to me, I'd never seen anybody do that before. And so I believe me having this weird background of banking and Bible were two kind of jacked up, non-coherent things, right? But, what I've learned since then is it kind of works. So anyway, that was my 2 cents.
You know that the Bible is the best financial guide on the planet if people would just take the time to understand it and read it, and instead of just listening to, a pastor or whatever, just read the Bible yourself and you'll get a lot out of it, number one. Number two is, Nelson, he'd start off his seminars and say, okay, I'm a Christian. I just want to tell you that. Anybody here who doesn't have a relationship with the Lord, then that's much more important than what I'm going to talk about financially. So if you want to talk to me separately after the event, I'm here for you. I mean, and that offended a lot of people, obviously, but he didn't care because, like you said, that's where he came from. He grew from that. Then he grew into the forestry career because and that's where he got the long range thing, right? And so he was a multifunctional kind of guy, So it all blended together. So IBC is what came out of it.
He could pull that off. I mean, just because he was so genuine, and I think people could see, David, even if they disagree, I think they could see this guy. First of all, he's intelligent. You couldn't question, his knowledge. Secondly, he had a heart for people, and I think people saw that.
When you talked about being a pilot and flying in the Caribbean, here I go, Lee. The first thing I thought about wasn't Esteban hiring pilots down there at one time? Hey,
Probably
that could have that could have got you multi-engine rated. The 9 years.
Could have got me all kinds of trouble.
Come on, man. I mean, you're not thinking long range.
I know, right? I know. I've corrected it since then. My wife says I still have that level of immaturity, but I think I'm growing.
Well, talk to us a little bit about the impact that you've seen in your clients' lives, those people that you've worked with who have implemented the infinite banking concept. Share with us a little bit about that.
Our approach is to work primarily with business owners or professionals. That just kind of naturally fits within what we do. And so I've got a client. Clients become friends of ours essentially because we spend so much time, working and serving on their behalf. And so when clients understand that, first of all, the principle that, and I think lots of time, even as practitioners, I think we skip through this and don't spend as much time on it as we should, but the principle that all money has to live somewhere, right? So all money resides somewhere. Some people it's in their regular bank account. Some people it's 401ks, IRAs. Others, it may be in travel. They spend all their money on vacations or on their home. I think that's the second biggest place where people put money in, second only to qualified accounts. So there's the idea all that money is living somewhere. So where we start with things, Lee, to make this impact with the client is by teaching them the principle, we believe that we can show you empirical data. So not a religious system, not a personal opinion, but math. We think we can show you empirically that your money's better off living here than virtually any other system. So as a result of that, the clients that catch this, and we readily admit it's not for everyone. Some people see this, and for whatever reason, they just resist it. But for those that it fits, then I think one of the first things that they see is I can have my money living here and growing and building for the future, along with all the other insurance benefits that come with it, while at the same time being able to scale up my business. I'll give you a quick example, and then that's kind of generic. Then I'll give you a specific example with a client. But generically speaking, if you take people that work in the real estate space, we've got lots of clients that are real estate investors, and we've got some builders, developers, people that buy and flip or buy and hold real estate. Think about for a second, if you know that you've got, say, if someone's got $1 million privatized, or if they've got $1 million that's sitting in a properly structured, dividend-paying, participating whole life insurance contract, if that's in that account in the form of their cash value, in our opinion, for the vast majority of people in the United States, now excluding the Elon Musks and Donald Trumps and the billionaires, if you exclude those, the vast majority of people, if you have $1 million, which is not that much money, but if you have $1 million privatized, sitting inside of these accounts, or as Nelson would say, a system of these accounts, then it's pretty much game, set, match. You win the financial game, because that's enough money that you can collateralize or leverage to do whatever you want to with it. So here's what it does for that real estate person. And, and if in the future, if there's ever a real estate person that's listening to this podcast, it allows you to make some decisions that otherwise you would not make. If you know you've got collateral sitting in an account and that you will not lose that collateral, no matter what comes down the pipe, then it gives you a certain confidence to maybe take a step that your maybe competitors would not take, right? Because for them, let's say that they're pulling money from an existing 1031 or sale of another property or whatever. If they take that asset, say $900,000, and they dump that into some development project, the building of a mall or commercial property, or even a residential subdivision, if they dump that money in, they could lose it, right? So if whatever happens with the building project, and there's 1,000 different variables involved that we can't control. You can't control the weather. You can't control the economy. You can't control the people showing up on time or people getting sick, delays and the hitting the timeline and construction deadlines. We don't control any of that, right? So because you don't control it, there's who knows what could happen. They could lose their money. So what does that do to you as an investor? That causes you to pull back, to be more deliberate, maybe to do more due diligence, and maybe to not pull the trigger on some deals that you don't have 100% confidence in. Versus if you have an IBC system that's properly set up and you're educated, you know how it works, you could take that $900,000, you could borrow against that cash value, not from it, borrow against it, all that, $1 million sitting in that cash value, continuing to grow, uninterrupted compound interest. You take that $900,000, make the investment in the real estate, project, and whatever happens with that happens, right? But that money's still in that account. So but I've had people say, well, Scott, but you're still borrowing that money. I said, well, that's true. You're borrowing against your cash value from the insurance carrier. But what you have to reconcile in your mind is, yes, you're borrowing money, which means you got to pay the insurance company whatever the interest rate is. However, all that $1 million is staying in your account, earning uninterrupted compound interest for life, right? Until you were to pull it out in a withdrawal. So it gives them a level of confidence. Does that make sense? I mean, they would make a decision that they may not otherwise make. And then now let me give you a specific example. And this was from a client of mine. Okay, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is their actual text that they sent me. And he sent it to me because him and his wife were in a bit of a discussion about who had come up with this and who had the best financial intuition for their family. And they're both brilliant, very competitive couple, but just a brilliant couple. And so they're talking back and forth, and so he says that this was brought up, that he brought this up to his wife 15 years ago, infinite banking. Okay. So put this in perspective. So David, about the time we met, right, about 15 years ago, and he said, I tried explaining how it works to my wife, but she was skeptical. And so we never moved forward. Okay, so you see whose fault it is now, right? So he says, my wife and I met Scott from Wellington Capital about a year ago, and finally explained when both of us were present. So we were both sold on the idea. For years, I had wanted to get started with a whole life insurance policy that would help me more financially than any other typical life insurance policy. He felt like he was wasting money on some insurance policies. He wanted one that would really work for him. And he says, we now have policies that are larger than I ever imagined we could have. The annual return on our investment is priceless. My advice to anyone is not to wait a day longer. This is something that can set your family apart and get you ahead in life. And it's signed David and Marilyn at the bottom. So anyway, he's an example of a client that has, for the first time, realized the power of leverage, because you could have brilliant entrepreneurs. And David, I'm sure you've seen this over your career, people that are brilliant with business, and they may be, cutting edge in their particular industry. But when it comes to money or how to leverage or scale money, they don't know. Right. And it's not, that's not being, I'm not downgrading that person. You don't know what you don't know. So Nelson, all the time, you need to rethink your thinking, right? Because a lot of times our thinker is broken. And so our clients have had their lives transformed. And again, this isn't really because of me or Wellington. It's because of the truth and the power of the infinite banking concept. And even further than that, it's because of the integrity with which I was taught. So I'd like to consider myself an IBC purist. We don't get involved in, the latest, marketing, sizzle for somebody out there trying to do things their own way. We don't do that. We take the inherent fundamentals, the basic tenets that make the infinite banking concept special, and we rest on those and we promote those. And our advisors are trained to do that. And David knows, when we have a new advisor come through, I tell them they need some experience in the field first. They need to be working, growing, understanding things. Secondly, they need to get enrolled in the practitioner program and be mentored and be able to walk through the process and learn it for themselves. So if you learn to promote the infinite banking concept the right way, it's very difficult for people to punch holes in that.
Nothing magical about it. It's just, there's nothing sensational about it. It's, it's hard work. You have to understand the principles, like you said, and you have to be committed to capitalize and, pay premiums, and go through the capitalization period, and then responsibly use your system, But you talk about business owners, your primary niche in the marketplace. The number one investment for business owners is their business. It's not gold, it's not precious metals, it's not the stock market, it's their business. That's where they invest all their time and all their treasure. And using policies as a cash flow management vehicle for that business, that just puts it on steroids. That's the beauty of it. And I think business owners understand IBC quicker than your average individual, because they see that, Nelson talked about, using a policy responsibly as a financial tool to finance the major things in your life is not difficult. But if you don't approach it like a business owner, then you're probably going to have trouble understanding how to do it correctly and do it responsibly, So So it's as simple as that. There's nothing magical about IBC, and it's not get rich quick. It's not like double your money, some of that stuff you hear on Instagram and whatnot.
He also said, David, to that same end, every time you open a new account, you start a new properly structured policy, it's important. There's all kinds of variables. It's important to be with the right kind of carrier. Certain carriers are better equipped for this particular aspect of financial product, that you be with the right type of agent or advisor, because they can mess things up royally if they don't know what they're doing. But assuming those are in place, what Nelson taught was every time you opened a new policy, you opened a new business, right? So it had its own miniature business. So you could even see that individual policy having its own P&L and cash flow statements. And so, yeah, but you're right. Business owners typically understand that to a much greater degree than other folks, like maybe somebody that's not running a business would.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to becoming your own banker, we talk about the grocery store over and over and over again. One more time, the grocery store is a business. And if you understand the principles of developing and responsibly managing and owning your grocery store, then you'll understand how to manage your system of insurance policies. So it's not hard, right?
People need to have a framework for taking in information. The way David explained this was it was better off for people who had seen the Becoming Your Own Banker book, who had seen this, right, and had read it or had some familiarity with it before coming to a 10-hour seminar, because then, man, it really takes off, right? But I think people need a context. They need some kind of framework to say, okay, this has a place where it fits in my brain, because, while, Nelson would say this is simple, the problem is people try to overcomplicate that. This is simple. However, it's different. It's different from what most people are used to doing as far as their finances are concerned. So I think there has to be an intentional effort on the part of a practitioner. If there are agents that are out there selling this, they should become a practitioner, because that equips them to know what they're talking about and to ensure that they do this with integrity. But then beyond that, it helps if us as practitioners were to place before our clients a basic context for taking in this information, right? Because it is new. And, I'm not sure that I have perfected that process of having a context to take in data about infinite banking, but I think that would be helpful for all people. We have a definite process that we use at Wellington, but it just struck me when David said that. That's true. If you have a basic exposure, a basic understanding to something, then you can progress so much more, and those words find a place and have meaning. Right. Another similarity, I'll tell you this, then I'll go back to you, David, to finish that. But today in the AI world, a lot of people my age, y'all, they have no idea, because there's no context. There's no place for that to fit in. Right. Because we've never seen anything really like AI before. We're still learning to Google things. Right. Now there's this new thing, Google's out, and True. So, anyway, it helps if people have a context, right? If they have some basic framework that data can be taken into.
Yeah, well, it's hard to give them that, basic context when you're fighting against all the influencers out there that have such a big presence in the marketplace. And all the Super Bowl ads, for example, how many of those are financially related? You see the Northwestern ads and whatnot, but they do talk about living benefits.
Well, and I think the more dangerous ones, David, are those, and I won't go too far down this trail, Lee, if you don't want me to, but the more dangerous ones are the people out there that talk about infinite banking, right? They'll talk directly. So you think, oh, well, I'm talking to somebody about infinite banking. And I've even talked to these people. I know you guys have too. You talked with a client and or a prospective client I say, oh, Scott, we're already talking to somebody. They're an infinite banking person. And that's normal. If they have talked to somebody, they'll make that statement. And I think the reason for that, y'all, and you talk to more people about this, you guys do than I do, as far as, people contacted you guys. But it's becoming more of a phrase where people know and have heard infinite banking concept, right? Because when we met 17 years ago, I think it was much, much less, right? But because of the influence of social media, it's escalating.
I call that free advertising. No, that tongue in cheek, but yeah, you're right. Infinite banking is a descriptor now in the financial services industry. So Nelson made a huge impact. The problem is, in what we hope that we bring to the table versus your generic Instagram, TikTok influencer is, we don't approach it from a sales perspective. So a 2-minute, paid commercial ad, or even worse, a 1-minute one about IBC, you tell them everything you need to know about it. And you end up with getting sold something that's worse than your variable products. Okay. Or you get sold something that might be the right product, but you don't know what the heck you're doing with it. Or you didn't even know it was an insurance policy or insurance contract. You thought it was, you're buying a bank, just like you can buy your Scottish credentials, for, $100 and, get a piece of Scotland or whatever. Some of these people think they're buying a bank because they're learning from somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're just flat unethical about what they are talking about.
I have a true statement about this, and we'll press on. There's a large a group here in the United States. I'll keep them nameless, but they're one of the largest production agencies for infinite banking, and I'm connected with some of the folks that work there, and clients will get to the very end, David, to where they're doing a funding. They're ready to have their bank account drafted, right, to fund their account. And they, of course, there's got to be some kind of electronic delivery of documents. So they open their email and they ask, "What's all this about life insurance?" You've been 6 weeks going through the process and you don't understand it's life insurance. And I one of the things that was so great about Nelson is Nelson was not ashamed to say life insurance. Now, I know today, everyone's terrified to say the words life insurance, right? But he wasn't that way, and he could bring this forward in a way that said, and this is me kind of summarizing it. So tweak me and correct me where it need be, but his perspective, especially from all the way from his first policy, right, his State Farm policy from his brother, that people had a product, but they didn't understand what they had, and so they didn't use it properly. And then even the manufacturer, i.e., the insurance carrier, even they didn't understand what they had, right? And so because of that, people have this negative connotation, but that's because you've got a powerful product that was designed wrong, marketed wrong, implemented wrong, right? So it's just interesting. If this would have been done, if this would have been called, death insurance and life benefit, then it would probably be, more accurate for people.
You're right, exactly right. Because everybody's going to die, so it's you're not rolling the dice there like homeowners insurance or any kind of P&C product.
Well, Scott, you mentioned earlier in our conversation about your organization and the importance of a good, strong mentor as somebody is coming in as an authorized IBC practitioner. Can you share a little bit with us about that?
Sure. I have kind of two groups of people that have been not just mentors, but kind of mentors and coaches, if you will. And part of them inside of the infinite banking world and part of them outside of financial services as a whole. Inside the infinite banking world, I've had some people that I just naturally gravitated to. Mike Everett has been a friend of mine, and and also what we had referred to, and I'm not sure where I got this from, y'all, but as like a Gen 1 person. He was like that first generation, that initial early batch of folks that came through, and James Nethery was the same way. So I would identify these guys. And James, I know James. He's a friend of mine, but I'm not close to him. I don't talk to him a lot like I do Mike. But hearing from these guys and being able to see how they have kept the purity of the process today, even after Nelson's passing, is encouraging for me. So I lean on that. I glean information from these other people, and I don't remember if it was Mike or who, but somebody had told me I'm a Generation 2 person. I'm like, well, what's that mean? And they're like, well, you were in the second batch, not the original. What was it, David? 9 or 13 or whatever. There was an original group, right? And I was subsequent to that group. But anyway, though, I kind of followed those. Mary Jo Ehrman is another one. I know Mary, but I mean, we don't talk all the time, but I try to follow what she says. I think, and I think what I'm drawn to, Lee, is I'm drawn to the people that are purists, that really do this the correct way, right? And they don't chase the latest flashing, new edgy marketing promotion. They don't chase all that jazz. They don't get involved with it. They do things the right way. And also, Ryan Griggs, who has come later, Ryan was after me into the infinite banking world. But I love his diagnostic, pinpoint accuracy approach to infinite banking. And so, I glean a lot from Ryan. We even featured him on our what's called our Monday Motivator, our a weekly Zoom that our company does. We had Ryan come and be a featured speaker for that. So I've drawn a lot from those guys in the infinite banking space. But David, I probably called David 100 times and asked you questions, about things, and you've always been there to be truthful in what you thought. If I was getting off track, I think we've had a good enough relationship where you say, Scott, what are you thinking? But anyway, it's so I've had these people, Lee, that were close and with Nelson for a long period of time. I had the benefit of knowing and loving Nelson and spending time with Nelson. But if I could rewind the clock, I would have spent a lot more time with Nelson. But it was, for me, that was a very special time. And my son even says to this day, I've got 2 sons and 2 daughters, all grown. And my older son, Zachary, and I don't know, David, if you remember him or not, but he came and attended that very first conference. Nelson ended up doing 3 for me, but that very first one in Greenville, my son, Zachary, was there. And so one of the things that he today is proud of is he actually met Nelson, and so for those of us that got to spend time closely with Nelson, it was a special thing. For others, I think, finding someone that has been close to Nelson, so you get as close to the source as you possibly can. I think that's important, y'all. And if they will, we stand on the shoulders of the people that have gone before us. And I can't stand these people. And I've called and griped and complained to David about this many times, but there are some of these people online that promote something, and if you follow that line a little bit, don't go too far because it's not worth it. But if you follow it a little bit, you see these guys aren't advocating what Nelson taught at all, and many of them don't even give him credit. So I'm one of those people that defends it, because all of us are standing on his shoulders today, and the benefits that, like, my family and my company and all the people that Wellington touches, we always try to improve somebody's life, whether they become a client or not, no matter how much money, that they've got, that they're contributing to their IBC system. It doesn't matter. Our goal is that each one of those people to be made better, so that they'll be thankful, that they learned something or that they grew because of that relationship. So those people were instrumental to me on inside of the infinite banking space. But I've also had some great mentors outside of that. Some of them I worked with personally. Some of them I worked with at a distance. Dan Sullivan, who other people in the infinite banking world, have done a lot of work with Dan. Dan Sullivan and Strategic Coach have been amazing. That's been very helpful. Also, Darren Hardy, does a lot of, professional improvement type things out there. Ed Rush, who's a friend of mine. He's also a business coach. And David, he's a pilot, F-18 pilot. He used to be. He's out of the military now, but he's a friend and influential person too. So I had somebody explain it to me this way in the church world, that you should always have somebody that you're following, right? So somebody's mentoring you. But then, Lee, I think it's also important to have somebody that you're leading, so that you're pouring into somebody else and influencing them, hopefully in a good way also. So I know that's a long answer to a short question.
No, I think that's great advice for anyone listening. And, I think that can benefit a lot of, certainly a lot of our new practitioners who are just starting their journey, and, just a solid advice, and, for them to learn from those who have gone before and who have gone down these roads. And, I think that's the importance of this community is, just continuing to learn from each other, no matter where you are in your journey. So, thank you for sharing that.
IBC people get pigeonholed this way, David, and maybe you've seen this, but when I talk with other folks, they'll say, well, yeah, the IBC guys, all they care about is cash accumulation. And, that's not true if you handle IBC correctly. And so, one of the things at Wellington that we promote, what I think is one of our value adds, is to have the client understand, first and foremost, our number one privilege and responsibility, because it's both, is to identify or to triage them financially speaking. So, whenever you're in a natural catastrophe, or God forbid a war zone or whatever, and there are casualties and people getting hurt and suffering illness or some kind of injury, then they'll have triage places set up, right? It's that triage center's job to determine who's serious. They go this direction, right, and get this level of care, and who else, maybe is less serious, right? So you can allocate resources appropriately. You have to be able to triage somebody to do that. So we do financial triage when someone comes into the Wellington orbit, and our goal there is to identify, are they hemorrhaging, right? And in our humble but most accurate viewpoint, if they don't have coverage, if they don't have adequate life insurance, that person needs some immediate attention, because, a few dollars can fix that massive problem. And I had a friend of mine once tell me that if money can fix the problem, you really don't have a problem, right? So a few dollars can fix that. Well, we go beyond that, Lee. With us, what we do is I want our clients to have the option of everything the insurance carrier will offer. And that's normally a function, especially after 9/11. 9/11 changed everything in our world, as you guys are aware. So it was no longer just a needs-based calculation, but it became a human life value calculation, right? So what you saw people in our industry trend to, and I think, legally speaking, they didn't have much choice, because there's exposure if you don't do this. You get a call from a guy in the long black dress, right? And when you stand on the judgment seat, so to speak, and you have a hostile attorney asking you, Mr. Crutchfield, this was your client, and why in the world did you recommend, $600,000 worth of life insurance when that wasn't even enough to pay off his house, and he's got 3 small children, and so you've got to be prepared for that, right? And so what we do, most companies, how this is calculated is they take their annual income times a factor based upon their age. So it's roughly related to how many years you've got to retirement. So, if you've got a 40-year-old with most carriers, they're different, right? But with most carriers, it's a factor of 20, 25, 30, something like that. So if you've got a guy that makes 500,000 a year and he's 40, then a factor of 20 times that 500,000, that's $10 million. Okay. So Lee, what Wellington does, what I believe it's our responsibility and privilege, is to share with him, Mr. Jones, this is, from our calculation, financially speaking, human life value. Now, it's not what you're worth. Okay. You're worth much, much more than dollars, but financially, your human life value is 10 million. So the second calculation, Mr. Jones, is the IRS will tell you for that $10 million, how much you can put in that policy. There's a calculation called the 7-pay test. And so we explain this to them, right? And so then our responsibility is to give them everything, or to at least make them aware of. This is everything the insurance carrier says you can have. This is your maximum benefits available. And this is everything the IRS says you can pay for that benefit. So this is the maximum funding or premium available. So we go to the very top of both of those areas. And I say that to you because, a lot of infinite banking people get pigeonholed as to not caring about all the other aspects of someone's life, right? All they care about is, pouring a bunch of cash in today so you can grab it and use it tomorrow. That's not even what Nelson taught about cash. That's not what he taught. He said what David said earlier, think long range, right? So not you pile it all in there today so you can go spend it tomorrow. But anyway, I think it's important that everyone hear that message, that it's maximum benefits available and maximum funding of those benefits. If you give a client both those numbers, Lee, I think you've gone a long way into actually serving your client.
I mean, there's all kinds of things about insurability, about, do you want to maintain some flexibility going forward? Do you want to pay everything up front if you possibly can? And then, you talked about a family situation with, paying a mortgage off, supporting a family after you pass. You got insurability with your family also. So you gotta think about that. And again, what percentage of your disposable income are you going to pay for premiums, But I think the term insurance option is critically important too, especially if it's convertible, because that gives you a lot of flexibility moving forward, So there's a lot to it. That's not, IBC is easy. Insurance is like a little bit more complicated, right? Yeah.
Sure. But the IBC practitioner that's truly a practitioner, right? And is true or walking in coherence with what was taught, both in the practitioner program, which is an extension of Nelson, and from Nelson himself, right? So people that are actually doing that, they're not that person that says dump everything in today so you could pull it all out tomorrow, and it doesn't even cost you any money. All those things are not true, and they're not what Nelson taught. So I think people seeing Nelson's approach was far more expansive and impactful than that. And if you don't believe that, the very beginning of this book, the very opening, says this is not some kind of scheme to sell more life insurance. That's not what it is, So anyway, I think it's important that people understand from a practitioner, that's really who we are.
I don't want to get into it now because we don't have time, but there's so many emotional stories about delivering death benefit checks to family members and things like that, it's, that changes a lot of lives. It really does. And so, that death benefit is critically important. There's no doubt about it.
When your family and what you guys are doing, and then kind of as an extension of that, David, the practitioners kind of form another circle around your family. But what you guys are doing is you're defending, I think, the integrity of the system. And it can be assaulted in so many different ways. So if you maintain the integrity of this system, and you've got a band of folks, those practitioners around you that are doing the same thing, all pulling in the same direction, that's when the Nelson's dream of really reaching the 10% that would really drive a change in monetary policy in the United States and put people back in control of their money, that would be such a, I think it makes it more possible because you guys are at the vanguard, right? You guys are standing in the gap to maintain the integrity of that system. So, as one of your products, right? We extend appreciation. I know I speak for tons of people that have been impacted by Nelson, what he did, and then David and Liam, what you guys do and what your family's doing. That was one of my primary goals, to being enthusiastic about this opportunity, because we are greatly appreciative for everything that you guys have done. So we look forward to building and continue to reach people and people that come through the Wellington system. We encourage them. I can't force them to do something, but we encourage them to take the path of becoming an authorized practitioner and learning how to do this the right way. Because then, Lee, what you asked earlier about clients who've been impacted, every single person that you guys reach through the practitioner program or through this podcast or wherever, every single person that you reach that takes the message, internalizes it, and then lives it out with integrity, every single one of those people make an impact on a multitude of others, right? Every single one of those at the next generation, a factor of 10 beyond that. So I was diagnosed with a very serious medical condition in 2010. And so I had this decision to make, what do I do with my time? And it was a nerve-wracking, shocking thing that I was confronted with, and my kids came in town from all over the place, and so there was all kinds of concern and tears shed and fear and uncertainty. Anyway, so as a result of all that, we had to make a determination: which direction would I take, and what would I do with my time? Because when you're faced with a finite amount of time that you have left to spend, you have to decide what's my life worth. All right. What do I spend my time on? And I can tell, people out there is no better place to spend your time where you can make an impact on the lives of other people than by being an authorized practitioner, by you being an advocate, an ambassador for the infinite banking concept, and that you do it with integrity. There's no position out there, y'all, that has the potential for greater positive impact on other people than this one.
Well, thank you so much, Scott, for being with us and for sharing your story and for sharing your passion for this concept. And we just really appreciate all the work that you are doing to continuing Nelson Nash's legacy.